I really have no other way to say this. You're gonna hate this game. From the infuriating crafting UI, the glaringly missing quality of life, procedural repetitiveness of the Fey realms, and the general clunkiness that exists in every early access game, Nightingale is a game that isn't going to appeal to most of the survival gaming community. However, for those of us who can get past the unfinished clunkiness of Nightingale, there's an immensely deep crafting game that opens up build diversity in a way we've never seen before. And now that I actually understand what the game is trying to do, I can't stop playing it. If you've played a few survival games, you understand the flow that these things usually have. The game plops you in the world and you build your starter tools that allow you to farm better materials in greater amounts to build more tools to gather more stuff. Then you use that stuff to build a safe place to store your extra materials and workbenches to build better tools and weapons. The curve of this progression is usually very quick. You go from stone to metal and metal to better metal, and the materials list is usually just stone, iron ore, and special metal ore. Then the things you make from those materials have static stats that are simply better than the previous tier of items. This goes for the buildings in those games as well. You start with wood buildings, then you go to stone and metal afterwards, which all have increasing protection as well as a unique look for each building style. This progression is very simple and very fast in every iteration of survival games that we currently have. This is not the case in Nightingale. Instead, you're going to be playing with rocks and sticks well into your endgame, and this is because the focus of Nightingale isn't reaching the endgame, but literally the long, arduous journey through the Feywilds, crafting your way very slowly up the tiers to success. This is where the magic of Nightingale can be found, but game reviewers who need to rush through a game to give their immediate opinion on a game to capitalize on the launch hype of a game completely missed this facet of the game. The customization and build diversity of Nightingale is immense and deeply engaging. The systems the player has to use to engage them is the problem. Here's a quick example. Let's make some gloves for a melee-focused fighter. At my current stage, I have 5 glove options. Frilled, which is a twitch drop, NTTC, Simple, Trappers, and Unadorned. The only way to see their stats right now is to put an ingredient in place, which should probably be changed in the future. This is some of that early access clunkiness that causes problems. The frilled glove stats with Tier 1 refined desert fiber and Tier 1 prey felt are 0 magic power, 1% critical damage, 0 strength, 5% melee damage, 5% range damage, and 30 max health. And TTC gloves with the same materials give you 1 strength, 10% melee damage, 1% range damage, and 30 max health. Simple gloves with Predator pelt leather give 0.1 strength, 1% melee damage, 1% range damage, and 16.5 health. These are the starter gloves, so you probably won't be making these at all, at least once you get the other recipes. Trapper's gloves give 1 magic power, 1% critical damage, 0.5 strength, 5% melee damage, 5% range damage, and 25 max health. And finally, the unadorned gloves give 1 strength, 5% melee damage, 5% range damage, and 25 max health. So just with our base materials, we would want to make the NTTC gloves since they give that 10% melee damage bonus. However, once you have access to more materials, this becomes a little more complicated. The gloves only need 2 ingredients, felt and thread. Felt is made from hide, and thread is made from various kinds of fiber, plant or otherwise. I currently have 4 types of fabled hide, 4 felt, which can be farmed from the named monsters in each realm. There's a glossary of where these things can be found, but it's a pain in the ass to find them. The ones I have in my bags are Tier 1 Haddock's Ox, which gives you 10% max health, 15% blocking efficiency, and 5% hunger mitigation. Tier 2 Wheeled Bear, which gives 15% max health, 5% strength, 15% blocking efficiency, and 20% cold resistance. Tier 2 Beelzebub, which gives 15% max health, 10% melee damage, 15% fire resistance, and 15% durability. And finally, Tier 2 Galumph, which gives 15% max health, 5% melee damage, 20% strength, and 15% durability. Now, which felt should we use? Tier 2 for the 15% max health is obvious. If you want straight damage, Beelzebub is good, but with 20% strength from Galumph felt, you'll be staggering enemies more often. If you have more strength, that staggers your enemy, and then melee damage just bigger numbers, right? The damage is probably a better choice, so we're going to make 2 pieces of Bezel felt. Next is the thread. Now you can just use any of the plant fibers you have available, but you might not know that you can turn meat into animal fiber and then use that to make thread. So using bezel meat to make fiber, then fiber to make the thread, we wind up with thread that will bring our gloves to 1 strength, 12% melee damage, 1% range damage, and 39 max health. These increases aren't as much as I thought they would be, but if we try using Galumph thread instead to get the strength bonus, it looks like this. 1.2 strength, 11.5% melee damage, 1% range damage, and 39 max health. So again, it's a decision to gain 0.2 strength or 0.5% melee damage. We don't currently know exactly how stats work, so we might just choose to use Bezel Thread for pure melee damage. Then we upgrade it twice to increase its gear score and its stats. At Uncommon, it gives us 78 health, 21.6% melee damage, 1.8% range damage, 1.8 strength, and 303.8 durability. At Rare, it gives us 117 max health, 32.4% melee damage, 2.7% range damage, and 2.7 strength, and 455.6 durability. Now we can add 2 infusions. 3 if the gear was epic level, and then we can add a single charm to this piece of gear. Infusions simply improve certain stats. I don't have a melee damage infusion that I can make, so instead I might add a strength infusion to increase the strength bonus of this piece of gear. The infusions that you make will be affected by the level of essence you use to create the infusion in the first place, but I mean, it's a kind of a no-brainer. You just use the highest tier you have available. It turns out that I did have a melee damage infusion to drop in. I must have gotten it as a drop somewhere. So we can just use that to put on our gloves also. Now, as I'm writing this, I'm not sure if you can put 2 blue infusions on a piece of gear, or if you can only have 1 and the other has to be green. We'll find out together as soon as I do this. Then, the charm. The charm of brutality does more damage to enemies that are prone or stunned. If we're using a maul with some bonus to strength, we're going to be stunning everything, making this charm particularly effective. If you aren't focusing on crits, the charm of ferocity might work well. It increases your base damage, but makes crits impossible. Charm of the bruiser increases your damage depending on how fast you're running towards the enemy. Then charm of the pugilist, which increases your damage depending on the strength of your gloves, which would by itself change your entire build. I like big numbers, so we're going to be using charm of the blind side here. And that is how we make a pair of gloves for a melee-focused fighter. Now, here is another thing. This is the Duelist card. It says play this card to increase the damage you deal as well as the damage you receive. Now, when you travel to any realm and you complete the Fey Tower, you can access the mechanism at the top of the tower to play these minor realm cards, which will also increase the effectiveness of your builds with some downsides. As a side note, completing a Fey Tower reveals all of the activities, all of the puzzles and things that you can do on that map. So it automatically reveals all of it to you. So your main goal when you get to a new realm should be to complete the tower anyway. So once you go there, you complete the tower, you access the mechanism, and you throw in whatever card is going to make your build more effective as you're fighting and completing those things on that realm. Now, the Hunter card will be helpful when you're farming these legendary creatures. It says play this card to increase the yield gathered from slain creatures while increasing the damage you deal to weak points and decreasing your damage dealt elsewhere. So if you just go for headshots with your melee attacks, you should be fine. The weighted card will increase the damage you deal and the efficiency of your harvesting while weighing you down and limiting your stamina efficiency. Now, I've heard that players break their legs pretty often with this card, but if you want the most melee damage possible, using this card is probably the way to go. Just keep a healthy supply of injury salves and you'll be fine. Depending on your immediate goal in a realm, you're going to be using any number of these cards and you can swap them out pretty freely. Now, ignoring the cards for a second, once you're done with your gloves, you can continue this process to make the rest of your gear. The gloves only need 2 pieces and it was a super simple process, right? This is just an idea for a melee build though. You can also build armor sets around rifles, shotguns, pistols, knives, and magic. Or any combination of all of the above. All you need are the right ingredients to improve the stats of gear pieces you're putting together. This is the depth that I'm enjoying immensely, and exactly why the reason why so many players are going to get overwhelmed with Nightingale. This is, of course, combined with the problems the game has with making the systems easy to understand and navigate. All of this nuance, all of the ingredient-specific stat changes and their tier levels affect every single recipe in the game, including food. Want gazpacho? A very effective stamina food that lasts 30 minutes? First, make some mixed plants. You can choose from spinach, carrots, mushrooms, and berries, and different variations of those individual things. Now you take those mixed plants and add some spice to make a salad. Spice can be made from any flour or plain salt, all of which influence the stats as you go. Now, take your salad and set it aside. You have to make the broth next. You need bones, oil, and spice. You can use the same spice as before to make it easy, but the oil is made from flower seeds or meat, all of which influence the stats of the oil. Now, mix all of those together to make your broth. Then mix your broth with your salad to finally make your gazpacho, which can have different stats depending on what you use to make it. If you mix ingredients to make gazpacho, you're going to end up with multiple stacks of food, which is a completely different problem altogether. And of course, that's me just really dumbing down the process. Making food is a glorious nightmare. Then, in order to gather some of these materials, you need to be on specific realms. The bezel boar, as an example, as far as I can tell, can only be found on a provision or forest realm. Berries are only on forests, salt is only on deserts, cabbage is only in swamps, as an example. I think I've made my point. I absolutely love this in-depth, almost mind-numbing crafting system. Oh yeah, and before I forget, building, you need different materials to build the different styles of buildings. Desert buildings need carved stone, and Tudor buildings need carved wooden beams, all of which need to be processed from raw wood and stone first before you can use it. A lot of the quality of life things that reviews thought didn't exist actually do, but the game never made it obvious, so those reviewers never found those things. The Skillup review talked about how they had to pick up each item individually, but they didn't know that you can pick up items within a radius of your character by holding E. In the end, many of the reviews you've seen are correct about Nightingale. It isn't in a great spot right now, with all of the quality of life stuff that needs to be addressed, in addition to everything that the game needs to be functional on a very basic level as an early access title. Welcome to Nightingale, a fantastic idea with a satisfyingly in-depth crafting system wrapped up in a very rough implementation. You will probably hate this game, but I absolutely love it, and I can't stop playing it. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. You're welcome.